4 years after the tumultuous withdrawal of the last American troops from Afghanistan, the question of a US military return has resurfaced at the very heart of global security debates. Former President Donald Trump has reignited the issue, placing Bagram Air Base, once the symbol of America's two-decade presence in the country, back in the spotlight. During recent remarks, Trump made it clear he considers Bagram central to US security. He warned that he wants it back or bad things might happen. The remark has reverberated across Kabul and Washington alike, sparking concern among Afghan leaders, international diplomats and military strategists who fear a renewed cycle of confrontation. Bagram Air Base, situated just outside Kabul, was for 2 decades the main staging hub for US and NATO forces during the long Afghan war. It was relinquished under the Doha Agreement, the deal signed between the United States and the Taliban in 2020, which paved the way for the American exit in 2021. To many Afghans, the return of US troops, particularly to Bagram, would evoke bitter memories of foreign occupation. For Trump, however, the base represents both a strategic foothold and a symbol of what he sees as America's premature retreat. The Taliban government in Kabul has responded to Trump's recent statements with restrained yet unequivocal opposition. A senior Taliban spokesman issued a reminder that the United States pledged that it will not use or threaten force against the territorial integrity or political independence of Afghanistan. Therefore, it is necessary that they remain faithful to their commitments. This remark underscores the Taliban's view that any attempt by Washington to return troops to Afghan soil would breach the core tenets of the Doha Agreement. Afghan officials have long maintained that their war-weary nation cannot afford yet another chapter of foreign military involvement. Trump has consistently criticized the manner in which the US left Afghanistan, describing it as chaotic and ill-planned. He has often pointed to the vast stockpiles of American military equipment that were left behind when the final US forces departed. On the 3rd anniversary of the withdrawal, those abandoned vehicles, weapons and supplies were put on display at Bagram, an image that Trump's critics say he has used to bolster his narrative of failure under the Biden administration. Yet analysts note the irony that the Doha Agreement enabling the withdrawal was itself negotiated and signed during Trump's own presidency. Observers say Trump's current rhetoric is aimed less at revisiting old grievances and more at pressuring the Taliban into a fresh round of negotiations. According to one regional analyst, what Trump is trying is pushing Taliban to a corner to have a new deal. So he is trying to get out of the Doha Agreement, pushing Taliban to make a new deal where they can accept a part of his force back on the ground. This analysis suggests that Trump views re-establishing a US presence in Afghanistan as both a bargaining tool and a strategic counterweight to China's growing influence in the region. Since the US withdrawal in 2021, China has steadily increased its footprint in Afghanistan, exploring mining opportunities and strengthening ties with the Taliban-led government. American strategists have voiced concern that the absence of US troops has created a vacuum in a country whose location is pivotal for regional security and global power dynamics. Trump has hinted that if the Taliban agree to host a limited US presence, particularly at Bagram, there could be rewards in the form of economic or diplomatic benefits. His remarks suggest an attempt to frame any renewed US role not as an invasion, but as a partnership. For now, the Taliban leadership has sought to maintain a careful balance. Publicly, it has rejected Trump's proposal, stressing Afghanistan's sovereignty. At the same time, Afghan officials are mindful of the economic leverage Washington still wields and appear keen to keep the door open to dialogue. Diplomats say the Taliban's tone, firm but diplomatic, is no accident. The group's leaders are aware of the fragility of their own rule, the country's ongoing humanitarian crisis, and the need for some level of international engagement to keep aid and investment flowing. Afghanistan's history is marked by centuries of resistance to foreign forces, British, Soviet, and most recently American. This long memory shapes the national psyche, making the idea of welcoming foreign troops, particularly US soldiers, deeply controversial. The political implications of Trump's statements also loom large in Washington. By blaming President Joe Biden for the withdrawal's chaotic final stages, Trump has once again highlighted one of Biden's most criticized foreign policy moments. Yet, the fact that the withdrawal deal was signed under Trump's own watch complicates the narrative and invites partisan debate. In Congress, reaction to Trump's call for a renewed presence in Afghanistan has been mixed. Some lawmakers, particularly hawks in the Republican Party, have echoed his concern over China's influence and the potential resurgence of extremist groups. Others warn that re-entering Afghanistan could plunge the United States back into an unwinnable conflict. For ordinary Afghans, the question of an American return evokes mixed feelings. Some, especially those who benefited from the US presence in terms of jobs and relative stability, may quietly favor renewed engagement. But for many others, the wounds of 2 decades of war, civilian casualties, displacement, and the sense of national humiliation run too deep. Street interviews conducted by local media reflect this ambivalence. A Kabul shopkeeper said he fears another round of fighting if foreign forces come back. A university student, by contrast, remarked that the Taliban alone cannot bring economic opportunities. Maybe an international presence will help. The global community is closely monitoring the rhetoric coming from both Washington and Kabul. Neighboring countries such as Pakistan and Iran, as well as Russia and China, all have stakes in Afghanistan's future direction. A renewed US military foothold would likely heighten regional tensions. Security experts note that any move to re-establish American bases in Afghanistan would require not only Taliban acquiescence, but also a clear framework to prevent history from repeating itself. The prospect of negotiations has thus far remained hypothetical, with no formal talks announced. As the debate unfolds, the future of US-Afghan relations hangs in the balance. Trump's remarks have reopened old wounds while highlighting ongoing geopolitical rivalries. For now, his words appear to be more of a political maneuver than a concrete policy plan, yet they have sparked discussions in capitals around the world about what renewed American involvement in Afghanistan might mean for regional stability. For Afghans, the challenge remains the same: navigating between powerful external forces while striving for national sovereignty and peace. For Washington, the question is whether re-engagement would secure US interests or drag the country back into a conflict it had so painfully exited. The shadow of Bagram looms large over these deliberations. As McBride summarized from Kabul, with a history of invasions going back hundreds of years, talk of foreign boots on Afghan soil is highly emotive here, and an American boot, especially given recent history, a step too far. Whether Trump's words mark the beginning of a serious push for US return or simply a rhetorical gambit in his political campaign remains to be seen. But the debate underscores that Afghanistan's fate, even 4 years after the US departure, continues to resonate on the world stage.